Welcome in, everybody, to the Please Stay Inside podcast. My name is Rob. This is episode number 12. We are joined today by Joshua Terhune. He is a licensed mental health counselor. You can find his information on joshuaterhunecounseling.com. Last name spelled Terhune. Joshua, welcome on.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So, I guess first and foremost, just generally tell us a little bit about yourself. What is it that you do, and what is it that you do on social media?
Yeah, so I've been a therapist for the past, what year is it, 2000? Over a decade, I think 11, going on 12 years now. Been in the field of trauma for the past 14 years. I moved from a group practice. I left my group practice in January and started my own practice, and part of that involved social media. So I started that in late January, and that has been a very interesting time in my life. And so I've just been making some TikTok videos for the past 2 months, and that's been a lot of fun, very interesting. I work with mainly kids, mainly trauma. I work with some teens. I work with some families. I work with some adults as well. So a lot of the content I do is centered around those things and just kind of my life too.
Awesome. Out of curiosity, so I guess I would love to, talk a little bit. We'll I think get to a good bit of the timeline, but what is it that I guess pushed you to move from the group practice to private practice?
So I guess the best way I can say that is I was with this group for 7 years, and we were going in different directions. The owner was getting kind of burnt out from the pandemic and just having a group practice for over 10 years, and sold it to a company that doesn't align with my values. So I was like, I talked with other colleagues that had left and got the courage to push out on my own, and here I am.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, what was that decision-making process like? 'Cause, I mean, I imagine, it's difficult leaving something that, that you've been used to, around colleagues that that you've learned from, everything like that. What was that like for you?
That was very, very scary. I am very much like a group person. Frankly, I don't really consider myself like a leader. Like, I'm usually like hanging in the background doing my thing. Like, I just thought I was going to be with this group for forever, really. Things changed. And so, I talked with a lot of different colleagues, just getting their perspective, and everyone, one after another, were like, this was the best decision that I ever made. I wish I did this sooner. It's a lot easier than you think it is. And so I was like, okay, well,
yeah,
the adventure is calling me.
Absolutely. So, yeah, you went for it. That's awesome.
Yep.
I love that. So going back, I guess, even further, what is it that, I guess, initially sparked your interest in therapy? Like, were you interested in psychology previously? Like, what is it that eventually got you there?
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I had a depressive episode and saw my own therapist. And after that, when it was time to look towards college, it was like, I wanted to figure out why people do what they do. And I was like, well, I guess that's psychology. So then I went to, so my dad is a disabled veteran. So I was able to go to a public university in my state for free. So was able to do that. I went to Ball State, did psychology, and there was a class, I think it was like counseling psychology, like I think like 320, where it's a Tuesday, Thursday course where Tuesday, like, you learn like a therapy skill, and then Thursday you go to the practicum clinic and you practice that skill, and you're able to get feedback and stuff. And I did that class, and I fell in love. Like, during that class, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And it's been history since then.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I know. I think going into the initial the initial practicing these therapeutic methods, all that kind of stuff. I think honestly that's one of the points where I had most of like the flip-flopping going on, where like you have those moments where things go really well and you're like, I could really see myself doing this, and then the times where you fall flat and it's like, oh gosh, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially like starting out, it felt like trying to drink water out of a fire hose. Like, it was just, ugh, yeah,
That's fair.
yeah.
That's
It was a
fair.
lot. Yeah.
Did you ever consider like a different route, like research, anything like that?
No, no. That's a good question. No, I never like. I plan on doing this for the rest of my life, and
Yeah.
I've had that feeling ever since grad school. Like it's
Hmm.
like this is it. Like this is what I want to do. Like
Yeah.
I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm very similar boat. Like I know we talk about,
Nice.
rest of life things, and I know sometimes like my friends will talk about like retirement plans and all that, even though we're nowhere close to that. And I honestly,
Yeah,
I kind of see myself in a similar spot. Like I would love to just continue doing this, and you know, yeah, just going the rest
yeah,
of my life doing this kind of thing.
yeah. Ride it till the wheels fall off.
Exactly, exactly. So within the work that you do, because I know you mentioned that you work a lot with kids, you have some adolescents as well. Had you always wanted to work with kids?
Good question, Rob. No, no, I didn't.
Uh-huh.
When I was in grad school, I was a peer victim advocate, which is like someone that helps along with like someone is assaulted, and
Hmm.
so go to the hospital and you help counsel them, help comfort them, and help provide kind of resources for them. And the leader of that, who was actually like working for the university, was like, "Hey, do you want to go to the child advocacy center, which is like where like kids go to like be investigated or be interviewed or what have you?" I was like, "Yeah,
Hmm.
sure." And so I went to a team meeting, and they were talking about a few different cases, and there's like a few detectives and like people from like city hall and stuff, and like I liked it, but I was just like, man, I don't want to really work with kids. Like they're loud, they're noisy, you can't
Hmm.
control them. Like it's just chaos. So I'm like, nah,
Right.
I'm good. But then my first job was working with kids, and I was like, and like once I started doing it, I realized that like playing with them and like the way kids play, it like therapy is like naturally embedded in children's play, and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And so that really like really sealed the deal for me.
Mm. Tell me more about that. The role that therapy has in play, like that how that occurs.
Hmm. So so especially for younger kids, they don't have the sociolinguistic
Hmm.
structures in their brain to like say all the complexities in their what they're thinking and feeling, but they can do it through play. They do
Mm.
it through the symbolism of play. So take for example like hide and seek. It's not just hide and seek. They may be learning object permanency, which is,
Mm.
are you going to be there when I need you?
Hmm.
Um, are you going to be consistent? Are you going to be the same? Or are you going to, do you care enough to come find me? And
Hmm.
it's like, when you start learning that and like, I'm naturally a skeptical person. I'm like, there's no way. Like, this
Hmm.
doesn't, no, like, they're just playing. It doesn't make sense. But it
Uh-huh.
just kept coming up again and again. And I was like, okay, there's something to this.
Hmm.
And I mean, yeah, it keeps coming up. So it's like now I don't even question it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool. And yeah, I was talking with another parent this week about playing charades, and it's like, oh, it's having fun. It's like, yeah, but they're also learning like interpreting like nonverbal
Mm.
behavior. They're also like being mindful about their nonverbal behavior.
Hmm.
And so it's like, yeah, you're playing games, but you're also learning a lot too.
Right.
It's like,
Right. And I mean, with not just playing, but I mean, I feel like a lot of what kids learn, or like just like a lot of how they learn, can be, it's not all that explicit. It is a lot of just kind of picking up on things and then reacting to things, seeing how other people react to how we react, and it's so. I mean, I
mm-hmm,
think it makes a lot of sense that play might be in the same kind of thing, especially like what you're talking about, where there are multiple people involved, and there's all these different parts of their brain that have to get up and going during that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I think I said on like one of my TikToks, like Mr. Rogers said, play is the
Hmm.
work of kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, 100%, like they're working. It's like you can
Hmm.
call it play, but it's serious stuff too.
Hmm. Absolutely. I'm a very big Mr. Rogers fan myself.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He was a little bit
Oh,
a little bit before my time. I was born in '93, but you
okay.
know PBS continued to play his stuff for the longest time, and so I got to see a lot of Mr. Rogers, and I think nowadays being able to see him and see what he does, you know, it's like just watching it just puts you in a totally different mode, and you know
Hmm.
he had a way of communicating with people that I just find so just magical in so many different ways. Just that the compassion that I feel like people felt from him whenever they would talk to him.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely. It's like none of us met him personally, but we
mhm,
knew he genuinely cared. Like there was no
mhm,
question about it,
absolutely.
which is really amazing. And then his I don't know, his company or what have you does Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood.
Mm,
And like when my kids were younger, we would watch that, and I was like,
mhm,
they have to have like some like child psychologist or developmental expert because they know what they're doing, like with
uh-huh.
repetitions and songs and
Yeah.
lessons. It's like, yeah, they know what they're doing, and they genuinely care about getting it right and not
Mhm.
just necessarily entertaining the kids. They can learn as well as have fun.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's kind of go into, I guess, just the that parenting aspects, and since you bring that part up. So with working with kids, I guess one of the things is the so when you're thinking about working with a kid, you know, you're conceptualizing the case, all that kind of stuff. Um, do you also work with families of the kid, parents, all of them?
Yeah. One of my general principles is I try to do as much work with the parents as possible.
Mm,
Um, they have a huge, especially the younger they are, the more influence they have on the child's life. And so it's
mm,
really important that we're working towards the same goals. So I really try and work with them so they can work with the kids because I mean, I may be in the child's life for 3 months, a year, well,
mm,
if so longer, but like they're going to be parents their entire lives. So like if they can have the
mm,
tools and skills needed, then I'll be obsolete pretty quickly and
mm,
the child will still have their needs met. So
mm.
that's the goal.
Yeah. So you are, I guess, kind of there to work with the kid and then work with the parent on what you're working with the kid on, and then you slowly kind of fade out and they take it from there.
Yep, exactly. You got it, Rob.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I that the we were talking a little bit before this, and you know myself, I didn't expect to work with kids as much as I do, and one of the things that became abundantly clear very quickly was how important it is to work with parents as well. Um, you know, especially
Hmm.
because um, one of the things I started to notice was that when you work with a kid and then you just leave, you know, the parents can start doing something totally different. And so it's like, you know, that 45 minutes, an hour, whatever you were spending there may not have been as effective as having that parent involved within that process. Um,
Hmm.
out of curiosity, do you ever find cases where, you know, there are just, I guess, different wavelengths in terms of like how the parents seeing things, how the kids seeing things, and I guess I wonder how you navigate cases like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Very, very, very slowly
Mm,
because you have to kind of navigate both sides because you have to communicate. I mean, you have to validate and support, the kid or teenager, but also like validate and support the parents' perspective as well, and those
mm,
two can be conflicting with one another. So definitely have to. I really just I really don't even try and like finagle. It's like I'm just like transparent on my thought process. So it's like,
mm,
you know, you have this perspective, you have this perspective, like how can we come to an agreement, or like what's important about this for you, what's important about this for you,
mm,
because oftentimes there's this barrier of like fear, especially with the parents. Like they hear some sort of message that the child is expressing, and I'm trying to think of an example. Well, like a kid's like talking about their trauma or something their parent did and their
mm,
reaction to it, and then the parent's like, well, I'm doing the best I can,
mm,
or oh, you're just doing this for attention. And it's like you kind of got
mm,
to like rewind. It's like, mom, Dad, what are you hearing when they say this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they have all these guards up and defenses up because of their own stuff. So having to work with them through that too before
Mm.
meeting the child's needs. And especially if they've had a lot of either trauma or a lot of pain in their life, where they've had to learn these defenses. Sometimes it can take or if their sense of like shame is so
Mm.
strong, like working with them is a very, very slow process,
Mm.
especially when they don't think that they're the client too. Like, oh, you're
Right.
just working with my kid.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. I was just going to ask, is it common to, I guess, recommend therapy for parents who are in that position, or is it kind of a shaky subject of like, you don't want to be like, hey, maybe you should go to therapy, and then they'd be like, what are you talking about? Why would I do that?
yeah, well, yeah, I'm usually like that. Like I was like, yeah, I'm usually like, hey, therapy for you might be helpful to get this support that you need. 9 times out of 10, they blow me off, but it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I still gotta like put that out there just in
Right.
case. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. You bring up something that I think is really big on, it's something that I see a lot on TikTok nowadays. Because, with a platform like that, people are sharing pretty intimate details of, where they're at in their lives, and people talk a lot about, or at least a lot of the communities I've connected with are a lot of people who share their own mental health journeys and their own traumas and everything along those lines. And one of the really big things I hear from a lot of people, whether they be millennials, even, Gen X, etc., is that a lot of people talk about the coming to realize that perhaps their parents had created more trauma for them than they had previously understood. And I guess just first and foremost, what do you make of that? This pretty, it seems a very largely shared experience.
yeah, no, I've definitely noticed that too. Well, I think it's like a lot of things that happen in childhood, like we just kind of write off as normal because it
Mm,
was like normalized within the family or within the culture that you were in. And so it's like you never thought to even like question it. It's like that's just the
mm-hmm.
way things are.
Right.
But then TikTok especially it's really good at connecting people who are like you.
Yes.
And so it starts pointing out these things that are like exactly like, oh yeah, this happened to me. Oh, I do this. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, this is why.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like, oh, is it okay if I go like, oh shit, like,
Yeah. Yes, TikTok is great for epiphanies that you didn't want to have.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Oh,
Oh man.
man. So, I mean, within all of that, I feel like it's also like, as you brought up defense mechanisms earlier. I feel like part of this too, part of like the normalization, is not only because if we don't know any different, why are we going to think any differently? But also, I mean, I feel like there's still also, and this is something I've experienced myself, this tendency to almost idealize our parents as a way of kind of protecting ourselves and all of that. That, well, my parents wouldn't have done anything wrong. Clearly, they must have been trying to help me in some kind of way. I must be mistaken about this. There's no way that anything wrong could have happened here. I guess. Well, do you? What do you think about that as like a defense mechanism?
Yeah, idealization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a very painful reality to realize that they missed they missed some things or a lot of things, something that was really important to you that they simply missed, that you didn't get these needs met because of them, and that you had no control over this.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a very bitter pill to swallow, especially if you really looked up to your parents,
Mm.
or if you think that this idealization is like rooted in like respect or
Right.
loyalty, then it can be really, really difficult.
Mm.
Because like on one hand, it's important to acknowledge what you've been through and the impact it's had on you,
Mm-hmm.
but also, you know, it's due to their lack of meeting those needs, and so it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But it
Absolutely.
can be really painful.
It can be. It can be, and one of the things I love that you mentioned the idea of like respect and loyalty, because I know that's one thing that people can sometimes get caught with, is that especially for people who have had intact families their entire lives, sometimes they say, well, some people didn't have a dad around, or they didn't have a mom around, or some people are raised by their grandparents or in foster care, so I consider myself lucky that I had these parents, and so I wonder if can those two things coexist? The gratitude for some things, and also the constructive part of like I really wish that things would have been better, and I feel like in ways I deserved a little bit better.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, Rob. Like both of those things can coexist. Like one doesn't cancel out the other because they might have missed on certain important aspects in your life doesn't mean that they weren't great parents and that they loved you and did the best they could. Like all of that can be together.
Mm,
It really complicates things, but
mm,
absolutely 100%.
mm. Awesome. So within, because I mean, you work a lot with parents, you work a lot with kids. So I would love to, I guess, just tap into some of your expertise on everything. So when you're looking at, I guess, when you're looking at parenting styles and just ways of parenting that are research backed, are tend to be more effective than others, what kinds of things do you typically see in these more effective parenting styles?
So I guess if you were to like label or categorize them, it's called like authoritative parenting. John Gottman refers to it as like emotional coaching.
Mm,
So you're able to understand your child's developmental needs because meeting a 3-year-old's needs is different than taking care of a 13-year-old.
mm,
And so the ways you respond to them need to meet them where they're at with that. On top of having a high degree of control, understanding what's best for them in those moments, but also being responsive and flexible when when plans need to change, or if it's too much for the kid, being able to pull back and listen to them, or if they're doing really well, pushing even harder.
mm,
So it's really being flexible. So I guess the three things I tell parents is being attentive, attuned, and responsive.
mm. Okay. Would you mind kind of breaking those down for us?
For sure. One, you need to pay attention to them, so you
Hmm.
can't just be on your phone or doing your own thing. Like you need to be understanding what they're going through and actually being aware of it. Being attuned is again understanding, being in harmony with them,
Mm,
understanding what they're going through in those specific moments. Are like, oh, we're going to be doing this situation, so they often so like if the kid's like very anxious, I understand that I may need to talk to them beforehand about what to expect to help decrease the anxiety instead of you know putting out fires when they get there and they're
mm,
running around. And then being responsive again, so like if you're pushing them too hard and they're starting to tantrum, or they're starting to fight and kick or yell or shut down, like, okay, this is too much, I'm gonna pull it back a little bit, help
mm,
them regroup, help them regulate.
mm,
And so being able to like be flexible in those moments.
mm. Okay. And I guess, kind of hear the continuum of all of it. Being able to notice it, react to it effectively, and then adjust accordingly as we're going along.
Yeah, absolutely, which is extremely difficult for parents
Yeah.
because oftentimes there's more than one kid.
Hmm.
Parents often are tired and there's lots of other things to navigate too at the
Right.
same time as well as your kid. So
Right.
yeah, it's it's a balancing process, absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What would you say, I guess, to the parents who are maybe really aware of, I don't, like perhaps the people who have had rougher childhoods themselves, and they're like, well, I don't want to pass this on to my kid, and or just parents in general who are just really worried about the process of going into this, of having a kid, and they might be really scared about all these different things. What advice do you think you would give to them in trying to navigate this process?
Yeah, excellent question, Rob. You must be a great therapist.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. But the biggest thing that I see is parents can be really hard on themselves, especially like when starting off, because they're really aware of what they shouldn't be doing. And so when they start trying to do the things that are better, it's extremely difficult. So sometimes you might automatically respond the way you used to, or you're just really aware of your gaps, and they can be really hard on themselves instead of noticing that and promising to do better next time, being gentle with themselves, forgiving themselves. That's the hardest person to forgive is yourself.
Right.
That's really what I try to emphasize.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like we can, just as we can idealize our own parents, we can sometimes idealize ourselves and think that we are supposed to be perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry. What were you gonna say?
No, that's it. That we're supposed to be
no,
perfect.
it's
as
like,
well.
it's like, oh no, you're getting me on the soapbox here. But no, 100%. I mean, even as like a therapist, like I'm like, oh, I gotta be perfect. I got to, no
Yes.
mistakes. Like, but I'm not here to help people be perfect. I'm here to help people be human, and that's accepting your flaws and vulnerabilities, your, the ickier parts of yourself. That's also folded into this too.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna that'll be a big thing I'm trying to take away from this as well, because I'm still generally pretty new into the therapy field, and so I do get so stressed out. Like when I meet new clients, it is like the weight of the world is on my shoulders, and like I don't want to I want to make sure that they're comfortable. I want to also make sure I get the information. I want to ask the right questions, and I want to it can be so much, and it can flood our minds so much to the point where we can't be as effective as we want to be, which I assume could also be the same kind of thing with being a parent, that we're looking out so much for all of the wrong things and all the things that we're doing wrong, that we can miss these valuable moments with our kids as well.
100%. Yeah. I mean, as humans, we have a negative bias, so we notice. It's much easier for us to notice the negatives, and it's a lot harder for us to notice the positives. But it's incredibly important to hold on to those, because that's incredibly important as well.
And I feel like in part, mistakes are also, they are a natural, and I think also kind of important part of being able to grow up. That being able to recognize mistakes and being able to recognize how people respond when they make mistakes.
100%. Yeah. Being able to have that humility to like realize like, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, I heard it the other day. The sound, what is the sound learning makes? Oops.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm taking
like,
that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I know. I heard that. I was like, I'm putting that in my back pocket.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. I love that. I heard somebody speak before. I'm trying to remember where it was. I think it was during like a trauma conference or something, and they had mentioned that I think being a good parent was about like being a good parent like 40% of the time or something like that. I don't know if you've heard that number before. If you remember what it is exactly.
Yeah. So in order to build a secure attachment, parents need to respond to their children's emotional needs accurately 30% of the time, 30 to 33% of the time. That's it. 33, one out of every 3 times you need to be accurate with your responses.
Man.
And so on the one side, it's like, oh, I can take some of the pressure off of me. On the other side, if you have an insecure attachment, like, well, what does that mean for your childhood and the way your parents responded? So.
Right. Oh man, that is a hell of a double-edged sword.
I know.
Wow. So I do want to also ask a little bit, because I know that when we're talking about parenting, there's always a debate about the best ways of parenting, and there will forever be a debate about the best ways to parent. And one of the things that I see people arguing about a lot right now is about gentle parenting. And does gentle parenting work? And I guess I wonder, from your perspective, first and foremost, what you think of gentle parenting, and then I guess we can get into some more of like the misconceptions after that point.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I'm not familiar with like gentle parenting. I've tried to look it up a few
Mm,
times, and it doesn't seem like it's like a tried and true like approach that's like coming out of some like
mm-hmm,
institute or whatever. It's just kind of like, the public has like put a label on like gentle parenting, but like
mm-hmm,
I've heard about like some of the aspects, and it's like, oh yeah, like that's what I do. Like,
mm-hmm,
is that do I practice gentle parenting? I guess, like, didn't realize
mm-hmm,
it was named something like that. So.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly where the terminology came from. My understanding of it, we had a guest on earlier in the podcast's history, Gabriel Hannons, who's really awesome. And he does a lot of things with parenting, and I think the way that he equated it essentially to the authoritative parenting, that
Mm,
it's
yeah.
most closely resembling that. I don't know if there's more to it, if somebody wrote a book on it, and that's they had a lot into it, but that's I think essentially what they're talking about with gentle parenting. So I mean,
Hmm.
authoritative parenting. I know you talked a bit about that before, and it seems like it's a pretty effective, and that is a pretty tried and true way of going about things.
Yeah, 100%. Um, because ideally what you're trying to do is like you're not just trying to like raise a child, you're trying to build an adult.
Mm,
So having that goal in mind, you're helping them to develop these critical thinking skills, these problem solving skills, being able to connect and compromise with one another and build relationships.
mm,
And I mean that starts from, even before day one.
right.
It starts before you even were thought of being born.
Mm-hmm.
And so just having that idea in mind, and that's always the goal. It's just going to look at differently in different developmental stages.
Mm, right. It's yeah. Again, like you mentioned, it's more of just like that guiding. We are attempting to build and help that person build themselves in a
Hmm.
lot of ways.
Yeah, some people refer to it as like you're not an engineer trying to mold this child out of
Mm,
clay. What you're trying to do, what how you should look at it is like being like a shepherd and providing that safe environment that will provide for all of their needs and helping
mm,
them explore the space so they can grow and develop into who they were meant to be, not who you want them to be.
mm, right. I like that. I think it's a really meaningful way of putting it. Um, what I guess are some of the misconceptions that you feel might exist out there about this style of parenting? People feeling like it just won't work. Not for my kid, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I hear that. Where it's like, oh, I think one, or maybe kind of the feedback I get from the parents I work with is like, oh, like you just want me to like let them get away with murder,
Yeah.
or like, there's no consequences. Like, no,
Hmm.
absolutely, there should be consequences, but when rain down on them, they're
Mm,
shutting down. They're not able to process and problem solve. They're just trying to figure out what you want in order
mm,
to make this stop.
right.
And so it's again, it's helping them to develop how to connect, how to regulate, how to think through what happened, what was their responsibility to it, and how to do better next time.
Hmm. Right. Which I mean, it sounds like you're talking more about not so much focusing on what the consequence should be, but focusing more on like what is the lesson to be learned here.
Hmm. Yeah. So they've been doing meta analyses on corporal punishment and spanking for, it's the 60s, so
Mm.
over 60 years now. And it's been shown time and time again to be good for one thing and one thing only. Do you know what that is, Rob?
What's that?
Immediate compliance. It
Mm.
works to get them to do what you ask them to do. But there's a lot of other negative consequences. Like
Mm.
they don't internalize these moral standards. They are often in domestic violence relationships, increased substance use, increased mental health issues. The
Mm-hmm.
list goes on and on and on. But it works because they then comply. They're very compliant and obedient, but
Mm.
that's it. They learn to follow rules. They don't internalize them.
Right. Right. I hear that. I mean, and I feel like it also just in talking about the trauma aspect of things, it I feel like it almost turns the parent more so into like an aversive stimuli rather than someone that you can go to for guidance and for support.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then that stems into later adulthood where these relationships being vulnerable is
Mm,
either it's unacceptable, it's a sign of weakness,
mm-hmm.
and then relationships suffer after that.
Yeah.
You're not able to be emotionally intimate and connected with one another. It's hard to trust somebody else.
Mm, right. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective a lot. And again, I mean, just to bring this back to TikTok again, it's one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about, and the way that they express themselves and the way that they continue to exist after a more traumatic style of parenting. Um, so I guess this might seem like a kind of big question, um, but I talk to a lot of people on TikTok who ask about how to following trauma, how do we connect more with those emotional parts of us of ourselves? How do we address some of the attachment wounds? How do we address those kinds of things? Um, this does feel like it's leading up to be a very big question. Um,
Yeah, I know.
how do you, I guess, how can people begin to do a little bit of that healing? What do you feel like are some places where people can start? Within a
Mhm.
therapeutic setting.
Within so I love Bruce Perry's neurosequential model, and he goes by the three R's. So
Mm-hmm.
and it goes from like brain development. So it's regulate, relate, and reason. And so you want to start by regulating your body, helping getting your body and your nervous system in harmony with one another. Your brakes and your gas are working together instead of all gas no brakes or all brakes
Mm-hmm.
no gas. um, so making sure those are online. Or I've heard of like having like a race car engine and bicycle brakes.
Mm,
um,
I like that.
so making so making sure you're breathing, you're eating, you're sleeping well. And then the second one is relate, and that has to do with like your midbrain and limbic system, and that is having social connections. And it doesn't necessarily mean having to talk about all the emotions, but having a good relationship with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
being on the same wavelength as them. And then the third is reason, which is like problem solving,
Mm,
because when we are dysregulated, our thinking brain shuts off as a way to help us protect ourselves and survive.
mm.
And so if you can get that online, then problem solving will start being folded into the mix too.
Oh,
You'll be able to think more clearly.
yeah. Huh. Do all of those do those come in like a certain order? Like, is there a way that like when
Yeah,
working through trauma they
yeah,
come in a certain order?
yeah. Regulate, relate, reason. Same. Yeah. So like,
Mm,
regulates like brainstem, cerebellum, like diencephalon, and
mm-hmm.
then relate is like midbrain, limbic system, and then reason is like your cortex, your frontal lobe.
Mm,
And so like kind of like bottom up processing or
mm-hmm.
somatic therapy.
Right. Yeah.
So
That makes a lot of
that's why
sense.
like, yeah, so like with teenagers, oftentimes I think the biggest coping skill that I hear from most of them is like music.
Mm-hmm.
That is rhythmic regulation. They're singing, they're dancing. You got to be in this coordinated, connected movement. Um, are going for walks, breathing. These are all rhythmic regulating movements.
Hmm. I like that, and I agree. I always hear kids talk about music being like the one of the really primary kinds of coping skills. Um, I feel like there's a big application in what you're talking about to kind of going back to parenting a dysregulated kid. That sometimes I like you were talking about, sometimes when people are trying to regulate their dysregulated kid or they're trying to provide consequences, whatever it might be, they can sometimes pile things on and pile things on. But it kind of occurs to me that when somebody's dysregulated, they are so separated from that part of their brain that can do what their parents are asking them to do.
Yeah, no, yeah, they're not thinking step by step like, oh, I did this, so I'm gonna do this next time. It's like, just I'm just trying to figure out what you want me to do so I can do it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not like, yeah,
Mm.
how did I get here in the first place?
Uh-huh.
What happened? What was my role in this, and how can I
Right.
respond differently? It's like, just tell me what to do so I can do it.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so I mean, I feel like I'm bouncing to side on this.
No,
But I
no, you're
guess
doing great.
in situations like that, how can parents respond? Because I know sometimes, kids can become dysregulated in ways that are like legitimately really difficult to kind of work through, and it can be very overwhelming for parents. What can people do, generally speaking, to try to address those situations in order to hopefully get their kid to a point where now we can talk about what was the lesson here and all of that?
hmm First thing is like check yourself, because if you're dysregulated and you're coming at
Mm,
them, you know they're reading your body language, because again, like, they don't necessarily have all of the social structures in the brain to like interpret all this stuff. They're like,
right.
oh, dad is mad,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, so then they start going into like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, okay, what do I got to do? Like, their defenses start flaring up, and so you really need to be mindful about how it's impacted you.
Mm-hmm.
Try to be medium chill, try to be a robot, emotionless, walk up to them, really be mindful of your body language. Try and meet them either at their eye level or like below, because like a lot of times, like, you know
Mm-hmm.
I mean, adults, you might not feel like you're a big person, but to these little
Mm-hmm.
people, like, you're just towering over them, and oh, you're mad, like you're this giant coming to crush
Right.
them. And so, really being mindful of that, softening your voice, getting on their level. um Trying to think what else. So like the three questions I kind of go through is like, what is the function of this behavior?
Mm-hmm.
What lesson do I want to teach, and how do I best teach it?
Mm-hmm.
And really trying to not not lecture. Try and be as short and sweet as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, the acronym I use is ACT, ACT. Acknowledge the feeling or wish, communicate the rule or limit, and then target the acceptable
Mm-hmm.
alternative. So I'm trying to think of an example.
So maybe a kid who, perhaps a kid who didn't get what they want. I know that's a really common situation. So they wanted
hmm
something, they didn't get that, and they're becoming super dysregulated at home. Maybe yelling, throwing things, just generally, they're they're a bit of a mess right now.
hmm So yeah. So again, body language, but so it's like, you're really frustrated you didn't get that thing.
Mm,
That's okay, but we can't get that right now.
mm,
So how about you need to use your inside voice or big boy voice, or
mm,
let's go for a walk. Let's blow some bubbles. Let's play with balloons.
mm,
Whatever you kind of know, what will help them redirect them.
mm.
And then when they're able to be calm, come back to it. Ideally less than 30 minutes after that has occurred, and then have more of a discussion.
Mm. I like that strategy. I especially love the redirection. Let's try to get our focus in a different direction rather than the thing that's making you mad. I feel like that adds up. That makes a lot of sense in that context.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially for parents like who have really done kind of the strict disciplinarian, authoritarian, just like, do as I say.
Right.
They're oftentimes their kids aren't going to immediately respond to this approach. They're going to continue to
Right.
keep doing that, but you need to trust the process and continue to keep doing it. And once they realize, like, dad's not going to get mad, I'm going to be safe even though I'm doing this,
Mm.
like, they'll follow suit too.
Right. They don't need to go into fight or flight anymore.
Exactly. Like, we can have a calm, rational discussion about
Hmm.
this.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Which I mean, again, when we talk about trying to help a kid to eventually become an adult, having having those conversations, I feel like can be very, very helpful. Um,
100%. And if I can say one more thing,
Absolutely.
it's also important to realize that they're kids too. Like
Yes.
sometimes when you're 7, like might have been a long day, like whatever you try to do, they're not going to be rational and they're
Hmm.
just going to be, off the chain. And
Yes.
that's okay too, because
Hmm.
that's developmentally appropriate.
Hmm.
And so acknowledging that as well, no matter what you do, no matter what you pull out of your bag of tricks.
Hmm.
Some days you're the dog, some days you're the fire hydrant, and you just
Hmm.
gotta, learn from it and figure out what you'll do next.
Absolutely. And I mean, I know even us as adults sometimes, we can have those rough days and we come home and
Oh
we
yeah.
get in a Facebook argument or something. Uh,
Yeah, like yeah. The reason I went viral is because, or a couple weeks ago, because I was so mad at this mom. I was just like,
uh-huh.
I just, I mean, I don't like this is like as mad as I get or as
Uh-huh.
animated. It was just like I just kind of just like this is what happened. It's
Uh-huh.
like oh dang, like millions of people saw that. Like that was really just directed towards one person.
Uh-huh.
But
Oh man. The things that'll go viral, it'll catch you off guard sometimes.
yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
Oh wow. So I do want to swing back around to just the trauma discussion as well. So in working with trauma, you know, there, I guess everybody can kind of be on their own different levels and where they're ready to start working and how they're hoping to proceed with things. Is there a way that you kind of determine where somebody is at? What they can tolerate, but before you get started, or I guess as you're getting started, is there a way that that conversation kind of takes place? How people, go into therapy to work through trauma?
hmm so I follow what's called like the ARC model. I don't know if you had seen that
Mm-hmm.
on some of like my videos, but like
Mm-hmm.
think of like a pyramid or a house. Like the foundation of this is attachment. They need to have a safe haven, a place where they can feel like they can trust somebody and be able to fall apart or just show the bad parts of themselves, their shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a caregiver that they know will be able to be there for them to help pick up those pieces. I mean, that is the bedrock, because
Mm-hmm.
if you try to process trauma and they don't feel safe or they don't have someone that where they feel loved, it's almost like consciously or subconsciously, like they know like I can't go there because if I do
Right.
that, like I got to look out for myself. I
Mm-hmm.
can't do this. Like I can't go through this and protect myself at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have to choose one or the other, like you're going to protect yourself. So
Right.
like you just kind of keep hitting a roadblock. So making sure like that attachment piece is the foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and then focusing on regulation skills and capacities. Again, working with coping skills, helping them identify feelings and emotions,
Mm-hmm.
helping them problem solve and express their unmet needs. And then the next part, when you're working with kids, is competency. So helping them uh, get back to their developmental levels, helping them with developing an identity, helping
Mm-hmm.
them have stronger social connections and supports. And then ultimately at the kind of top of the pyramid is integrating this trauma into their lives.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. What does integration look like? What is the, I guess, ideal type of situation?
I refer to it as kind of like understanding like that is a part of your life. It's neither good nor bad. It
Mm-hmm.
simply is what it is. And so remembering the past but letting go of the pain.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I guess like when you use the term like integration, like integrating it into your story,
Yeah.
it's not the whole story, but I guess it's a chapter in that story.
hmm Yeah, and there's concepts. I mean, so if you go through like one trauma, it can kind of go through. There's 3 different ways it can go. One, it can be like you can go through like resiliency, which is like trauma happens and
Mm-hmm.
kind of normal, same as. And then if you have trauma and then you get worse, that's post traumatic stress. But there's also
Mm-hmm.
post traumatic growth where
Right.
something a trauma happens, and it actually, you grow from it and you develop. And so being able, you can absolutely do that too.
Yeah, I hear that, and I find it so interesting how people respond differently to trauma, and how I've been asked before, why does PTSD happen to some people and not to other people, and that's a difficult question. At least it has been for me to find a good answer to. I don't know if you have more insight into that, and what sets up the trajectory for how this happens following a trauma.
hmm Have you, well, I guess one, I follow like the biopsychosocial model. So
Hmm.
like there might be differences in their physiology, like the
Mm.
HPA axis, what is it, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal glands,
Nailed
like
it.
just kind of, yeah, thank you. The hormones and everything like that.
uh,
Um, yeah. And then psychology, the way they were raised, how they inherently see the world, and then their social environment, and
mm,
um, how that whether either encourages or discourages how they make meaning of what's happened.
mm.
Um, but have you heard of PACEs? Like, do you know what ACEs are? Like adverse childhood
Yeah,
experiences. Yeah.
yeah.
Do you know? Have you heard of PACEs?
Uh, I feel like it sounds familiar, but probably just because it sounds like aces.
Yeah,
So no,
yeah.
I don't think
I
I know
know.
what that is.
It's really marketing. They call it protective and
Oh,
compensatory childhood experiences. And
huh.
so there's research in 2019 that's come out of Oklahoma State that's identified, I think, like 10, I think they've narrowed it down to 10.
Mm,
Um, they call it like the antidote to ACEs, which is like, because like they ask that exact same question, like how come one kid could have 7 ACEs and
mm,
go through these horrible experiences and have all these negative outcomes, and how could someone else with the same experiences be fine or even better? It's
mm,
like, so they've kind of done that, and I've done a video on it,
mm,
but some of them, they're some of them are easy to take for granted, but then
mm,
like when when you look at them, it's like, oh yeah, these can be really important. Like one of them is like having a trusted adult outside of the home,
mm.
having like physical activity, feeling like I think going to community events or feeling connected to your community, having one best friend. Like
Mm.
those things are incredibly important.
Yeah, yeah, and I like the way that you kind of broke it down across the different areas. I feel like that makes it easier to also be able to understand, um, that we're looking for the biological, the psychological, and the social aspects of things that can help to build some of that resiliency. And of course, to loop all this in with one another, parents can also serve in that role as well. That they can be very
Absolutely.
protective. They can be that safety net. They can be that person to go to when needed.
hmm Yeah, they can definitely help shape all of those things, especially their psychology and their social environment.
Mm, yeah, awesome. So it has been wonderful, wonderful having you on. I have
Yeah.
just one more question before we let you go. So, given that you are a therapist, I really just want to know, um, is there anything that you wish you would have known earlier in your therapy career, earlier in working in mental health, that if you could go back in time, you feel like you would like to be able to tell that past version of you?
I really, and I say this to newer therapists all the time, like get into therapy.
Mm,
Whether you think you need it or not, you are going to be one, most likely experiencing vicarious trauma, but two,
mm,
the work that you do is directly correlates to how much like emotional discomfort you can tolerate. How can you sit with someone
mm,
else's darkness if you can't sit with your own? And
mm,
so like you won't be able to go to that depth if they hit that depth and you can't allow them to go any further. They're going to stay right there.
right.
And so you're going to, and a huge part, I think like 40% of therapeutic change is attributed to
Mm-hmm.
the therapeutic relationship. And so if you're not getting that full 40% or like a huge chunk of what you can influence, like, well, they're not going to
Mm-hmm.
change as much as they could if you hadn't done the work. So you got to
Right.
do the work. I wish people had told me to do that sooner.
Uh-huh. That is invaluable advice, and I'm
Yeah,
so happy
yeah,
that you said that. And
yeah,
also the 40% of the therapeutic relationship, again, it's one of those double-edged swords where it takes a lot of pressure off of us as clinicians. Like, oh, okay, we if we're doing a good job of being present, being here for our clients, that's good. But also, why was this therapist I had not not very great at being a therapist for me? Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
100%.
Well,
Yeah,
Joshua Terhune, I appreciate you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to come on here and talk with us. Yeah, last thing, anything you would like to plug? Where can people find you? All those kinds of things.
yeah. I'm still relatively new to TikTok, but I think my handle is like Kintsugi Counseling, KINTSUGI, which is an interesting story behind that.
Mhm.
But underscore counseling. Um, I think I'm also on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, but I haven't done much there yet. My website, joshuaterhunecounseling.com, provide counseling and family and parenting coaching. I will be expanding towards like creating some parenting groups, so more people can support one another, as well as I can help support them, help create a community where we can all help one another. Um, yeah, yeah, I'm looking to, you know, build my friendship with you, Rob,
Mhm. Oh yeah.
and continue to, help the world become a better place.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. It's very apparent that there is a lot I can learn from you. So I very much look forward to that.
And likewise, I love working with kids because I learn from them too. So,
Absolutely.
um,
Absolutely.
yeah,
We learn something every day. Well,
absolutely, 100%.
Joshua Terhune, LMHC, thank you so much for coming on
Yeah,
to
thank you,
the
Rob.
podcast. And all of you listening at home, either live or on the podcast streaming service later on, thank you so much for listening to the Please Stay Inside podcast. My name is Rob. Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk with you next time.